We will record this meeting and that will be published on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So if you somehow don't want to be seen on it, then you can take your camera out. Otherwise, of course, we would appreciate it if your camera is on so that we know who's online. Good. Welcome, everybody. Another salon of the Don Beck Spiral Dynamics Foundation. So we organize these meetings to discuss at the moment mainly international politics, social dynamics through the lens of spiral dynamics. So this is all about the application of spiral dynamics in the world. Tonight we have tonight the salon is about what does it take to bring peace in the Middle East, which is a big question. But Saeed and Neri have promised to answer it tonight, so we're looking forward to that. We've asked Saeed and Neri to have a conversation with us on that topic. For those of you, I don't know, most of you actually know them, but for those of you that don't know them, I'll introduce them shortly. Saeed is one of the members of the spiral dynamics community and has worked with Don Beck very closely for a number of decades. He's the author of Mnemomics, The Light of Ishtar, and Second Sapien. He was born in Lebanon, and he was part of the Center of Human Emergence in the Middle East together with his late wife, Elza Malouf. He's one of our community's prime system thinkers, consistently focusing on moving beyond ideology towards what actually helps society develop and coexist. That's the best way I could summarize your work in one sentence from my perspective, at least.
Thanks. So, I hope I can step up to that.
Yes, yeah. This very high expectations tonight. Neri Baron is joining him. Neri and I first met in 2006 during a confab in the Netherlands, and then he was already using the spiral dynamics model to clarify the dynamics of what was happening in the Middle East. He's an electronics engineer with a degree from Tel Aviv University in economics and philosophy, and he was also part of the Center of Human Emergence in the Middle East. Neri has been a prime member of our community, always guiding people beyond judgment to the factual reality and systems dynamics of what is happening in Israel and the Middle East. So that's my one sentence phrasing of how I view you, Neri. Yeah. We've enjoyed from both Saeed and Neri, we've enjoyed online presentations, and Neri's done some great one, not for the foundation, but for the Center of Human Emergence in the Netherlands on Israel a few years ago, before the current war started, and that was very insightful. So Neri and Saeed are not here to argue positions or to assign blame. They're here to explore underlying dynamics using spiral dynamics, of course, and Don Beck's ACE model, and to reflect on what conditions might make it possible to create real peace. So we're very grateful to have them in this conversation. I want to say a few words about what our focus is tonight, because I don't know how that is where you live, but in the Netherlands, any conversation around what's happening in the Middle East the last few years has been completely polarized, where people either have a pro-Israel or a pro-Palestine position, and all energy is spent on fighting that. And from what I see, that's part of an identity politics movement that we have, where you have to belong to your identity group. But unfortunately, I've seen very little real content conversations on how what can we actually do and how can we actually support the people that are suffering. Both of course in Gaza, at West Bank, and in Israel. And so tonight we really want to focus away from those identity politics to looking at what's factually there. As far as I know, neither Neri or Said are going to go far into history to claim, anybody being right or wrong about what's happening there. The focus really is how to move forward and how to create a stable environment. So we start with some videos on a couple of videos. Said will introduce them shortly, from work that's done in I think it was the West Bank, right, Said?
Yes.
In 2007, if I'm right.
Yeah.
So that's what we start off with, just to, because so well, Said will explain that, and after that, both Said and Neri will present some work, but they'll actually try to make a dialogue out of the whole evening towards the end of the evening. So we don't have any distinct other parts. We don't have breakout groups as we sometimes have. At some stage, we will invite you for questions and answers. What I actually suggest is that you write them in the chat, so that we can I can moderate a little bit and see that we can insert the questions that you have at the right moment in the presentation. Okay.
Right.
Good. So Said, please.
Okay. So I need to click on something to. Well, anyway.
Oh, I'll start the videos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And okay. So the videos you're about to see were filmed at an event that took place February 2nd, 2008. And what the event represented was really the culmination of the work at the Center for Human Emergence. So, the forefront was Don, Elza, Neri, and myself really being playing more of a background role on making sure, all the administrative things were done properly, all the funding that the thing needed were in place. But so, so this thing, which began in 2004, culminated in what we called the CHE, the Nation Building Conference. And its purpose, really, from a spiral dynamics perspective, was to show the world and the Palestinians what it takes to build the institutions that are the foundation of a modern nation. And so the first speech you're going to hear is from Nafiz Rifai, who I've asked to be on this panel, but he's just become too disillusioned with what was going on, understandably so. But he's the one who was the leader of the third generation Fatah. These are, the third. So it's PLO 3.0, except it's moved away from the initial, aspirations of the PLO to really be more directed towards orange values, more towards, live and let live, thrive and let thrive kind of values. So they were looking for a way to build their institutions that will help them achieve that goal of living prosperous, just like the Israelis did, just like people in the Gulf region with the riches did. So Nafiz is really the ideal the person to have led this. And in what you're going to hear in this videotape is how he's looking to inspire Palestinians who were at this conference, and there were over 700 community leaders from all over the West Bank that gathered in Bethlehem that day to really contribute to what they thought would be a nation building. So, this invitations were sent out, Neri, if you recall, to people in the Israeli government as well as the Palestinian government, and many of them responded by saying good luck to you. I mean, there wasn't any effort to derail what we were doing. We did this at a time, and this is important to keep in mind. We did this at a time where the political spectrum was a lot closer on both sides to the center. The Israeli government was more, center left, that allowed this to happen with with their blessings, and the Israelis, especially the Palestinians, through their third generation Fatah, were that aspirational aspect that I talked about earlier. So keep those dynamics in change, because very little of that still exists today, unfortunately, which contributes to the polarization. Unless we'll go over the ACE model in a while, but unless you're in that middle, nothing's going to happen. So, Auka, please roll the first tape.
I think I shared that wrong. I have to share it with the sounds. Moment.
كانت فكرة هذا المؤتمر قد بدأت بسؤال: لماذا لم ننتصر على الاحتلال الإسرائيلي؟ حاول مجموعة من الكادر الفتحاوي الإجابة عن هذا السؤال. مطولا توقفنا للاستفسار بعد ثورة 43 عام لم ننتصر على الاحتلال، لم نحقق التقدم. لماذا؟ هذه الأسئلة الكثيرة حاولنا مطولا الإجابة عنها، حتى سألنا لماذا انتصر الزولو على الهولنديين البيض العنصريين في جنوب افريقيا وأقاموا دولة، ونحن الذين قمنا ببناء الخليج العربي لم نستطع أن ننتصر، ولم نستطع أن نبني مؤسسة قادرة على إنجاز مشروعنا الوطني. بعد أن بحثنا مطولا وحاولنا الإجابة عن هذا السؤال، التقينا دكتور دون بك صاحب نظرية الديناميكية اللولبية. وجدنا هناك التفسير لماذا لم ننتصر على الاحتلال الإسرائيلي، مع أن هذا السؤال قد يثير لدى الكثير من اليائسين، قد يثير الكثير لبعض اليائسين وكثير من اليائسين أننا لا نستطيع أن ننتصر على هذا الاحتلال. هو برنامجنا في حركة فتح غدا لنستعيد السلطة، لأننا نريد أن نبني فلسطين، لأننا اليوم نقف في أوائل القرن العشرين. يجب أن نتسلح بالعلم. في جنوب أفريقيا الزولو تسلحوا بالعلم، لقد فهموا عدوهم وفهموا أنفسهم، وبالتالي نحن في هذه المحاولة وكلنا ثقة بكم أن نقرأ نظرية دون باك والتي صاغها بالألوان لنعرف أين نحن في عجالة سريعة، وبعد ذلك سنتوسع على مجموعات ونضع رؤيتنا. لن نتحدث عن الماضي لو سمحتوا، لأنه كلياتنا ندرك ما هو الماضي. لنتحدث عن رؤيتنا للمستقبل، كيف سنصنع هذا المستقبل، ولتكن صرخة ورسالة بصوت عالي موجهة إلى قيادتنا وحكومتنا من أجل أن نقدم لهم هذه المرة تصورا منا ماذا سيفعلون فيما يقدم للشعب الفلسطيني في هذه المرحلة، وماذا علينا أن نفعل نحن، ونترك الانتظار ونبدأ العمل في هذه المرحلة. شكرا جزيلا لكم. أنا بقدم لكم السيدة إلزا مالوف، رئيسة مركز النهوض وكافة.
So Elza's video, which is coming up, is really a continuation of that, talking about the aspirations and how. Notice how Neri kept repeating, "Do not squibble with the past." Purple, which is the primary center of gravity in the Middle East, always looks to the past to derive its values projected onto the future. That is really, as beautiful as purple is, that is one of its Achilles heels, is that it always looks to the past to determine the future. Blue stops that, and then orange begins to look towards that future. So it was critical for the gathering there to understand that. Okay.
Just can I comment something before that?
Neri.
The red is there, and it was there then, and it plays us all the 20 years. So we probably will discuss it later.
لكم أنا بقدم لكم السيدة إلزا مالوف، رئيسة مركز النهوض بالإنسان في الشرق الأوسط، أحد الداعمين للشعب الفلسطيني، وهي سيدة لبنانية تركت بيتها وجاءت إليكم لأنها تقف مع الشعب الفلسطيني ومع أمتها العربية من أجل نهوضهم نحو المستقبل. شكرا لكم.
كمؤسسة مركز النهوض بالإنسان الشرق الأوسط، يسرني أن نرعى نشاطات هادفة لبناء أسس سليمة ومتينة للمؤسسات والمنظمات العربية. هدفنا هو مستقبل أفضل لأولادنا. هدفنا هو مستقبل أفضل لثقافاتنا العربية ومجتمعاتنا. مهمة مركز النهوض بالإنسان هو تحفيز التحول الخلاق في ثقافة الفكر والتطبيق في جميع قطاعات واقعنا العربي. هدفنا أن ندعم من خلال نظرية الديناميكيات اللولبية وآليات التصميم الطبيعي المفكرين والمبدعين العرب الذين يقودون التطوير والتنمية المتكاملة في مختلف قطاعاتهم ومجتمعاتهم. هذا المؤتمر يأتي في إطار محاولة لدعم عملية النهوض في بلادنا، وهو من ضمن سلسلة لقاءات ودورات تدريبية عديدة في جميع أنحاء الدول العربية. إن هذا المؤتمر هو للنهوض بحركة فتح الأبية في القرن ال21، وهو ركن أساسي لنهوض فلسطين للقرن ال21. نحن هنا لمساعدة فتح على بناء أسس متينة لمستقبل أفضل، مستندين على نظرية علمية مثبتة وآليات التصميم الطبيعي التي تؤهل المؤسسات والحركات السياسية لتلبية حاجات المواطن. نحن هنا لمساعدة حركة فتح لتلبية حاجات وتطلعات المواطن الفلسطيني الاقتصادية والتربوية والسياسية والثقافية، والأهم الإنسانية. يسعدني ويشرفني أن أتشارك في عملي في الشرق الأوسط مع الخبير ذو التجربة العالمية الكبيرة في تطوير الإنسان والمجتمعات، الدكتور دون بيك. كفلسطينيين أولا وفتحويين ثانيا. وأنا بتشكركم على حضوركم هون، وبتشكر خصوصي اللي وقفوا على الحاجز واللي تعذبوا منكم، وشكرا لكم.
Okay, just a small remark after that. This was a series of bunch of speeches that were given by community leaders on what really needed to be done to get rid of corruption, what it takes to build institutions and so forth. And it all culminated with a speech by Don at the end, where he basically channeled JFK at his speech in the 1963 at the Berlin Wall, where JFK said, "Ich bin ein Berliner," and Don proclaimed "Ana Falastini," which means "I am Palestinian," and and kept repeating the line, the people who doubt if Palestinians can build their own nations, they should come to Bethlehem and see for themselves, which are lines that are repeated often in that speech with JFK. They should come to Berlin and see what democracy is all about. So I just wanted to preface it with that. And that was the culmination of our work. And unfortunately, our funding dried up with the onset of the financial crisis, and from there we just shifted to spreading the word about the CHE and our work. Alka, should we move to the next
slides, or for your slides?
Yeah, 1 second. Let me.
While you're searching, I get great memories from that day. I was very excited. I remember them coming back from Bethlehem, and at that time, because I was the Israeli, I'm moved from all relations. One of the situation was that the Palestinians didn't like to see Israelis involved in that, and we can understand that, and it's have reason.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to. I think I figured it out. There we go. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Format. Okay. Insert. Okay, so this is.
Saeed, why don't you start the slideshow and it'll look full screen with you? Probably look better for everybody.
How's this?
Yeah.
So, as practitioners of spiral dynamics, especially with large scale applications, it behooves any practitioner before they start any work, whether you are looking to determine what peace is, what governance is, what mental health is, any field that you're in, it behooves you to first ask the question, what does that specific subject mean to the different values on the spiral, to the different stages of development? If you don't ask that, you really will not be able to separate yourself from your own biases about what the whole thing is. So what we created here, what we created here is a table that basically answers that question. What does peace mean to the different value systems? And we're not concerned with beige because it doesn't exist by itself. But for purple, it's you obey the spirits, you obey what the word leaders, what the tribal leaders tell you, which is still a very common thing in the Middle East. Those are leaders that are realized in the purple red stages that tell you this is what peace is. What peace in blue is the rule of law, which seems to be eroding, and it seems like it is almost invoked every day that we hear today between the powers that want to preserve the world order, the rules-based world order, compared to forces that want to change that. Peace through commerce is more, peace. It is orange. It's I thrive, therefore we have peace. You move down to green. It's peaceful coexistence. We dialogue, therefore we will have peace. We are all equal. And then you move to yellow, and what needs to be done is that in yellow you examine every stage and see where it's stuck. and what peace means to that stage, and then you design according to what the needs of that stage is, not in the general sense of what peace means as a green statement, but what peace means to every stage. Okay, so I wanted to go over that slide to just open the presentation and just keep that in mind. Now, the next slide, Neri and I will discuss this in detail. So when we started this, and this was an invitation from Neri and Rafi Nasser.
Nasser, yes.
Yeah, yeah. You want to talk a little bit about that, Neri?
Well, we started here at 2000. We started Integral Group, and then we introduced to the spiral dynamic. And Rafi came from New York, and we find ourselves discussing spiral dynamics again and again more deeply. And we were fascinating on the story of Don Beck in South Africa. And I think it was Rafi's idea. And he says, let's call him in. So I think Rafi approached him and invited him in. And he said, okay. And then you got the founding for the visits. And we started this process.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember when Don called Elza and says, we got the funding. It's just like that. We got the funding. Yeah, pack your bags and let's go. And so it was in 2004 that Elza, Don, and I created the Center for Human Emergence Middle East, and we began our work. But then, on the onset, at our arrival, our Palestinian partners said, well, we're going to engage in peaceful demonstrations, in peaceful protests against the Israelis. We're going to have you carry water bottles and walk to the wall. And Don and Elza said, no, that's not going to cut it. We're here to show you how to build institutions. We're here to show you how to really be equal when you sit on a negotiation table with the Israelis. And so the very first thing that they did is the people that we trained, and there were groups of Palestinians who were intelligent enough to understand the model, and groups of Israelis intelligent enough to understand the model. We set them out to do a mimetic analysis of their own culture. Basically, go out and ask questions in communities to determine the mimetic profiles of each culture. And they came back to what, and this is, on the Israeli side, it was Israelis reporting back to us with the leadership of Neri and Rafi. And on the Palestinian side, with the leadership of Nafis. It wasn't, although Elza and I were Arabs, but we're Lebanese. Believe me, a Palestinian would tell you a different story if they sense your accent. You're from Lebanon, they will tell you a completely different story. But if you're someone from their community, they immediately trust you and tell you the truth. So these mimetic profiles were generated based on immediate feedback from the people. And what we got is the profiles that you see in front of you, that as aspiring as Fatah is to become orange, the center of gravity of that culture is red. Primarily realized in purple red with some aspirations towards blue. And if you look at the contours there, it is religious blue that represents the blue system there. Religion is usually the entry stage into the blue system. Okay. Now you look on the Israeli side, and Neri, I'll let you explain the complexity that existed there, and to just show the asymmetry that existed from the get-go.
Yes, well, I just notice that this image changes. And if you take it snapshots right now, you get a different picture. And I think actually this is what we're going to discuss. What happens is that the people in Israel had a much more green and orange perspective back then. And for them, they was looking to manage things and resolve things. So they were, in a sense, they were very accepting the model, and they took it as a tool. And we actually introduced it to organization developers, and they take it and used it, and it was very useful for them. But this orange now, like looking back, there was something there that was sure of himself, that the Israeli felt stronger. This orange strip this green strip, this 2000 and the 2000 situation where Israel felt like a startup nation, and they had a lot of economic success and connection to the American ways, make them think that they can solve anything,
Right.
and they can manage anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think it's important to also discuss, what Don called the assimilation contrast effect model. This is really important to, there was a detailed discussion on this in the presentation I made last year, Auka, the large scale design. So you can always reference, if that's recorded, you can always reference that. But what's important in this slide here is to really understand the nature of conflict on the political spectrum as seen through the spiral lenses. And so how Don modified the work of his earlier mentors was to divide the two political sides into, left and right spectrum, but also to give it designations based on the value systems that the culture belongs to. And so what you see in front of you is the 6 different designations that Don put on there, where the flamethrowers and the zealots are primarily in the red system, that you need to basically push those away till they moderate. The ideologues and the moderates, half of the moderates are also in that same rank, but then you begin to get moderates like in the blue system as they move to orange, they become more of a secular blue, as long as you respect our constitution, it doesn't matter what your religion is, sort of type. And then you move to the pragmatists, which are orange, which always want to make a deal. Hey, let's all prosper. And then of course, green is the basis of let's make peace. And so what this particular stage of the ACE model says is that generally you want to push away the people who on each respective side of that spectrum, that each party is responsible for pushing away its own zealots, flamethrowers, and ideologues in order for it to strengthen the center. So solutions, the closer you move to that center, the political center, the more peace is possible among parties. Okay, so that's so we came into that situation with this in mind, that that we need to not engage with the zealots, and when we need to, we will sort of expose them to the model and say, look, here's where you can win. For the purpose of moving you away from being a flamethrower and a zealots, like Don and Elza met with people from Hamas who were very religious. They wouldn't even shake Elza's hand. They would walk in like blue order. Don says he felt his grandfather walk in the room when they walked in, So, but he sat with them and with through empathy and listening to their story, he was able to gain their trust in trusting what he had to say. So these are the kind of like on the ground work that we need to do, and it all has to do with how do you either reject the lower people who are resistant to integration, or you moderate them so they can move up the spiral for the sole purpose of reaching a political center where peace is possible. Okay.
I can add something.
Yes.
Actually, we see here one system, but actually in the Israeli Palestinians, we have 3 systems. We have the Palestinian system, which has its colors and structures and dynamic, and they have their assimilation contrast effect model because they need to select the same. The Israeli has a different system with a different weights. And actually, when we come into this change process, we find a third system where we have these Palestinians and Israelis as one system, and the world as a environment, and that it pushes things around. So we need to take this kind of model and remember it has different systems, perspectives.
Yeah. We, towards the Q&A session, if anyone needs to bring those slides back up with a specific question about them, we can do that. But let's move on to the next. So this here has to do with a concept from, I put the pictures up, and again, if you really want more detail, go to the presentation I made last year. But this is here really a tableau of different images that sort of create a chronology for what CAPI means, the coalescence of authority, power, and influence. The top picture there is Don working with union representatives in South Africa. If you look at the lower column, that he started that when he first started working in South Africa. 15 years later, if you can look at the bottom row, third picture from the left, there's Don meeting with F.W. de Klerk when F.W. de Klerk was being awarded a peace prize in Oslo, talking like old buddies. To transition to that, it took 10 years for Don to gain the coalescence of authority and influence, which is needed for you to affect change. So the rest of the picture there just shows you the kind of on the ground work, the hard work that needed to be done. The pictures of Neri and back when you had a full head of black hair, my friend, with Rafi, Elza, Don, and Susan and Oren. Is that Oren? Yeah, that's where
Owen Entin, yes, he was
yeah.
part of us.
Yeah, next to it is the group of Israeli, trainees. Look at them; they're all greenies sitting on the floor, and look at the Palestinians. They're all like proper and blue, and so and then the next row is Don and Elza meeting at different universities, different community groups, and so forth. And the meeting with Hamas religious people that I'm talking about is like the third row, second picture, and then the rest of it are the people in the Knesset, Arab representatives and Israeli representatives in the Knesset, basically building the capacity to get CAPI, to get the coalescence of authority, power, and influence to greater circles in order for you in order for the culture to improve it, to embrace it, and then in order for leaders to say, hey, whatever they're doing seems to be working, we will embrace it as well. Now, one thing I want to bring up, the picture, third picture, first row, third picture down, that's Don and Elza meeting with the minister.
Gilad Sher. His name Gilad Sher.
Yeah. He was the Minister of Planning that was part of the Unity government back in 2007. And it was, carry that forward till today. It was his immediate colleague who was one of his assistants, according to some of the analysis that Neri did, that is now the head of the Gaza thing that Trump appointed. So you can tell that the pragmatists who have bright orange thinkers are there. I mean, even Hamas to this day has a spectrum of people in it. It's just a political party. It's just the ones that does most of the damage is the one that the world sees. But there are people in every political party that have the spectrum of values, and this is just a proof that there's still people in Hamas today that fall into that pragmatist stage. So again, this is a representation of CAPI. The last column of pictures there shows the different presentations that we made. The bottom right picture there is the pictures from that convention where those speeches were given. The top one is the presentation that we made. We made presentations twice to the United Nations Value Caucus, Values Caucus, in 2007 and then 2013. So, it takes a long time to change reality on the ground, and if it weren't for different factors that played in, primarily the funding element of the CHE, things would have been different today. We just won't know.
Just a comment that Don would say that we are not in the peace business. Right. It's like we were in a long process of change and creating CAPI. CAPI is a term that talk about authority, power, and influence, which are the elements that make society decision can be executed and managed healthily. And there's a lot of Dr. Isaac Adige's process model.
Yes. Yeah. So this is probably one of the last, next to the last slides here, the Arab Memo project. So based on the experience that Elza and Don had in a Palestinian experience, Elza developed a model where our work can apply as a microcosm as a blueprint for how the rest of the Middle East should develop. And so we called it the Arab Memo project. termed after the Genome Project. This is more of, depicting the value system memes and mapping them out. And the things that you see on there are the things that were called for in Elza's book, Emerge. What needs to be done for the region to really emerge into a true 21st century with resilience. And you can take a look at those, and this is really a guide for for anybody looking to do work anywhere. It's not just the Middle East, but you really, the first things you examine is the idea that, as a Westerner, you cannot come in and impose your own biases or your own experiences on people, that you have to look for the indigenous intelligence, appoint them to do the work for you. It needs to have an indigenous face in order for it to be resilient and transparent. You have to identify the stages of development within the culture and the content of it. Understanding the nature of conflict, there's not only inter-conflict, but there's intra-conflict as well. And that's just as important. Neri, you brought that up. There are, three things on the Palestinian side that are inter-conflict. There are two things on the Palestinian side that are inter-conflict, and so forth. So, and keep in mind that, anything that you design that it is intended to achieve peace, or through whatever mechanism you use, that it really cannot be more than at most one stage above where the center of gravity of culture is. Elza says here half stage, but if those systems are in an open state, you can begin to design from an entire stage above, knowing that these people are aspirational in wanting to really work hard to establish that. The rest of it is pretty much self-explanatory. It is a lot of hard work, but this is the kind of future that awaits the Middle East. And we will talk about what's happening now and whether, those essential, really blue stages of development can be bypassed or not. Now, this here was a part of the last presentation we made at the UN in 2013. This is Don's view on, how to apply pretty much a global template on how to achieve peace. The fivefold strategy. Strategy one, uncovering the models and the processes for global emergence, creating the measures and monitoring. So strategy two is primarily about the vital signs monitor that we talked about in that large scale system, which, Neri will be the ideal person to pick it up from here and design the electronics that go with that, or the digital stuff, and Ben too. Construct the scaffold for solutions to address needs, specific mimetic zones. People talk about Don's work in South Africa, but if you read his book, The Crucible, look at the different zones that were assessed separately. Each region has its own unique mimetic structure. And so you cannot design just one national policy. It has to have flexibility built in that accounts for a rural area that, probably doesn't have orange, that is very happy being in purple. You have to account for that. So design a macro strategy for introducing superordinate goals. Superordinate goals and the introduction of superordinate goals was very important in the Middle East. Don set out to say, imagine yourself being the Singapore of the Middle East. This is the vision that he gave those third generation Fatah, aspiring orange, and what do we have to do to build our institutions to have a stable presence in orange. That was what we called the future pull, the superordinate goal that will make you work to what you want. And so suddenly, parts of the history, the debate on who owns the land historically and so forth, sort of becomes less important. If you're in orange, you can work out a deal on how things happen. And so this is, again, a rough idea of the work that we've done, a rough idea of really how most CHEs around the world engaged in using large scale systems change. And I think this is the last slide. No, okay. This is the last slide. This is sort of our transition from what we've done 20 years ago to where the state of of affairs are now. This slide actually is from a presentation I made at the European Integral Conference this past, May. And this will carry us through the rest of the presentation here. The Middle East is experiencing a profound shift in what's happening on the ground. And that primarily has to do with the decline of Iran's influence on the region. Okay? Iran has been a menace in the region, not historically, but since the revolution, the Islamic Revolution of 1979. The image that you see there is the original instigator of that revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini, who, those words in Arabic say, God is great, death to America, death to Israel. Jews be damned, and victory belongs to Islam. Okay. Have you ever seen more red stuff coming out of the region than that? And if you have the money to back it up to create proxy powers around the region, more power to you. And that's exactly what happened. That's how the word spread about this is the new Islam and this is how it's going to express itself. And so through the process, they funded all these proxies from, most recently Hamas in Gaza. But then, the biggest threat, not only to the security of Israel, but to the security of Lebanon itself, was Hezbollah's presence in South Lebanon. Okay. Leadership wiped out. Thank you, Netanyahu. If there's, if there's a clock being correct twice a day, that's one of those times. Wiped out Hezbollah. The other supporters were through Assad, and that regime collapsed. Now Sistani in Iraq is a moderate, and he resisted the Ayatollah's need to adopt this radical view on Shia Islam, and he's integrating the Iraqi Shias into the national dialogue. So I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, but if you read Middle Eastern Arabic media, if you listen to Al Jazeera, if you read local newspapers, all the talk is about the flotillas or whatever, the Sixth Fleet that's heading over to Iran in the next couple of weeks, and how either the U.S. is going to do it on its own, and with the participation of Israel, they're going to put an end to the Iranian regime the way we know it. Those are dynamics that are happening on the ground as we speak. And so this is really the last slide that I wanted to present to wrap this part of the presentation up. But this is where the Middle East is now. It is very dynamic. There are tremendous shifts taking place. If Iran becomes, and it seems that it's heading that way, if it becomes less of an influence on its proxies throughout the region, the Sunni power with money would rise, allowing the region to really follow a developmental roadmap. And we can talk about how feasible and effective that's going to be in the next next hour or so.
I would like to add some elements for the picture. If I can show some slides, I'll do it. Can we share together, or you need to withdraw yours?
How do I do that? Or how do I?
Just stop sharing. See if I can do that for you. Oh, yeah, it's going, Said. No worries.
Okay.
So I made a bunch of slides, and now it's very easy with all these AI tools. You need to check it, so it's verified. But I wanted to go back to the 2006, 2007. If you remember, we had the second Lebanon war, was very traumatic to Israel as well. Although some say we won, some say we lose. And another thing that happens is Hamas cooked Gaza. It happens during Don's visits. But what happens to the spiral in Israel? When people leave, they see the world through the V-meme. So if we in Israel see orange, and Netanyahu is an orange, clearly orange worldview, we expect to see that, to think that everybody understands us and everybody thinks the same because we see the truth. And Israel thinking was that they're gonna manage the conflict. They're gonna mound the grass and make it sustainable. So what happens is, because this effort was actually very not pleasant, because mowing the grass means that people fire from Gaza and from Lebanon from time to time, and people kill, and your citizens are afraid, and that have influence on the worldview. So Israel started to shift from the orange center into more blue-orange. And I would say that today we are more blue-red than orange, the way the Israel worldview or internal system works. In Palestine, they also, our effort was with good intentions, but reality is what it is. And with the Hamas winning, because it has a blue system, because it was stronger than the Fatah organization, they were better organized, so they could win and hold the force.
And Fatah was very corrupt, Neri.
Yeah. That's
I remember Don telling the story of, they walked into a training session where, they pulled up in their Mercedes and their gold watches, and as the as Hamas was taking over parts of the West Bank, it says, well, no wonder they're doing it. Look at look how corrupt you are. You don't.
Yeah. But when we talk about corruption, and you living in a purple red environment, your cousin situation is important. And if you get budget for a project, you give it to your cousin. That's right. because you can trust him, and not the other clan. So even this corruption interpretation from us, from like Western orange-oriented thing, that see it as corruption because we know it doesn't work well. We know it. For them, on this stage, it's the way it is. Otherwise, you cannot manage. So we also need to incorporate that. But this kind of thing was happening through time, and then time passes, and this Israel thinks that it can manage things, and Palestinians start to avoid normalization.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was not involved in any relations with the Palestinians, it was because it was considered as some kind of normalization. And then the idea of resistance comes. So we're gonna resist. No, you cannot win us anymore, because we have the power to resist, and we are connected to the ground. And this is all those things are blue and orange elements in the Palestinian culture and society, that this is how it works for them. Yeah. Meanwhile, the orange started that this is started in the quiet years. Well, so it was not so quiet, but the quiet years, the development of this idea of Abraham Accord, where Israel started to connect with Arab states, and from the orange, sorry, okay, from the orange perspective, it's a good things. We are international relation. We sell things and we buy things, but from the Palestinians, it is they feel like they are being stabbed. The Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain are actually talking with those Zionists. So those kind of tensions actually happening, and it's actually bring us in Israel to more and more blue-red center. And actually, if we talk about the CAPI, actually the internal authority in Israel collapses. In 2001, we cannot form a government. the internal struggle within Israel. It's before 7 October. People riots on the streets and changing government decisions, and the government tried to change the courts and change judges, and meanwhile the power that the blue-red settlers get is getting more and more stronger. And in Israel's system, which is a very problematic political system, although they are a minority, they can achieve a lot of power by a coalition agreement. So we actually get Israel that in 2006, 2007, we were very optimistic, and we actually said, well, Israel can wait. We need to work on Palestine because Israel is so developed. Actually, because of the Love condition that created and the time that passes, the Israel spiral shifted down. And now Israeli feels it very, very strongly. If you talk with Israeli, they feel insecure. They feel very pessimistic from both sides. The red, blue are thinking of like they think that the green guys are sabotaging the country and they are traitors and all that, and the green guys think they are fascists, and because the red blue got power, they do terrible things in the West Bank and other things. So this kind of internal array exists in Israel, while then come the 7th of October.
Yeah.
And the 7th of October is a blow to the orange-green. No more management. If you continue managing the conflict, you get a Holocaust-style events.
Yeah.
And if you ask Hamas, this is what you'll get again and again. Yeah. We'll do it again. We'll do it again. We'll break you down. And this tension actually move Israel more into its red-blue regression. Yeah. And explains a lot of the Israel behavior and decisions that people from the outside see, and the uncomfortable feelings of Israelis from all sides. For instance, they put laws of annexation, and actually because of the separation between Gaza and Palestine and West Bank, and in the West Bank we have all those settlers and all those Israeli army control. And actually, the PA lost all its authority, all of its power, and actually, it's not functioning. Nobody really counts it anymore. While in Israel, you get a blue-red idea that we're not gonna manage the conflict anymore. Let's solve it. Let's push the Arabs out. Let's make them disappear. And we'll get back our blue Jewish state with all its glory, God's glory, or whatever they think. But it's actually, this is the situation. And now when we get to the external force that comes, so we don't have a power. So Trump, which has an orange-red behavior, a strong orange-red, he comes and he forces a solution, an orange solution. But when you look at this solution, you see a gap. And you mentioned it, they have half a stage progress. We need a half a stage progress. And now, after Israel ruined the Palestinian capacity to live, and the Palestinian society is in so low life conditions, expecting them to internally support the promises of the orange is very hard. And from the system, like from spiral dynamic perspective, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Now, it's a picture that we give. We are not looking for all the dynamics that's going to come right now. And there could be good elements within the board of peace, and they're going to be. And I remember that Blair, when we consider him, we saw a lot of yellow elements with him back then. The Arabs don't like him because of the Iraq foesca, what happens in Iraq. But worldview is a worldview. You make mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
But maybe those elements will help. But right now, when we see the power and the relationship, it seems very very unsettling. So we have a situation from that we have this assimilation contrast effect working and actually make assimilation within Israel and within the Palestinians. The peace advocates are not acceptable anymore. Don't use that word. Yeah. The mean green meme that we remember the term get in a way it get copied, like their postmodern ultra relativistic, everything is relative and there's no truth idea, is actually copied into the blue-red rhetoric, and you actually see the same structure of claims coming back to them and used in order to win an argument. And there is this life condition, this ontological collapse that Israel feels, and I'm sure that Palestine feels as well. So we don't know how to secure the future.
Yeah. You know, Neri, one question I have that I really couldn't find an honest answer for is, how does Netanyahu feel about what Trump is doing with, with his, not just the peace board, but, his plans to move forward with the Abrahamic Accords or whatever he called them, that included the redevelopment of Gaza? Where does, I mean, he, the initial impression I got is that Netanyahu wasn't happy with it, and Trump just said, "Screw you, I'm going to do it." He's transactional. Don't expect anything more than that from him. But how does he feel, and how do the Israelis feel about this?
Well, for Israel, right now, if you ask a typical Israeli about a Palestinian state, the answer will be it will bring 7 October again.
Yeah.
All the idea of Palestinian independence and creating a state seems not feasible from the Israeli perspective. So in a way, when you hear the internal talk about the 20-point plans, they don't talk about the third stage. And I guess that within his coalition, they say, well, it won't work. And actually, the extreme right elements in his coalition, like supporting aggression towards the Palestinian in the West Bank. People in the West Bank are leaving their houses because of, I call it pogroms. Some the red, the blue-red don't like that I call it pogroms, but actually Israeli doing pogroms on Palestinian in West Banks. Mm-hmm. And the meaning that it's a pogrom because the state let it happen. So these kind of elements are continuing working. The other element is that the Israel society has a lot of internal tension. And Netanyahu knows that there is only point of power is being head of state, being a prime minister. If you are not in the coalition, if you're not a prime minister, you don't have any power. You can only talk. You can only try to be influencer. But the system says that the government, the coalition is governing. And actually the legislative the ability to Legislate is actually also elements of the coalition. It's actually don't let others to legislate. So for Netanyahu, he has internal problems and external problems. And outside, we are dependent in the United States. United States actually open center of control in Israel, which is American. It's actually American in Israel. And they are working in an orange way to make sure that the plan is working. This is what Orange do. We had a plan, we put the people in, the amount of the awareness of the complexities of the spiral, I don't know. I don't know how much, I don't see a lot of elements in it. And I don't manage to find, I was looking for Palestinians who discussing Palestinian governance. Let's make a new state. So let's talk about how make a good governance. And if they would listen to me, I would tell them not do it as the Israelis, because this doesn't work well.
Yeah.
And so for their building of Palestine, it's a very important discussion. How this society, which has a lot of clan in it, which have a separate and balance of power, and the Arab world knows those elements. If you look of UAE, it's a set of a few clans that manage to organize it. Sorry?
There you go.
Yeah.
So no, go on, Neri. It was just.
Okay.
Can I just intercept something?
I just wanna.
Neri, can I just shortly tracking back to the peace plan, because Cindy makes this remark saying that this is not look at Trump, he doesn't seem to operate very much from Orange. I think if you look at that plan for development of Gaza, I think the best we could say is it's aspiring Orange, but because it misses the blue layer, it will result in a corrupt red mess, both on the side of Trump's administration and the people that are stepping in, as well as in the of course in Gaza itself. And I think that is also the risk. If you're saying that Israelis say, well, we don't trust self-governance of Gaza, it is because they've never seen the blue layer in that, right? So self-governance has always been red eventually taking control. And so in both situations, it's just this missing blue layer that makes it either unattractive for people or makes it unrealistic.
Even in our days, Alka, when we were looking to build institutions, and the Palestinians, the PA had Fayyad in place, and he was everybody's hope, except the guy worked previously as an executive for the World Bank, and he began to introduce orange measures on how to run a country based on Western models. And suddenly he started introducing, income tax and property tax and, and business taxes, and to a community that has never known taxes, not in recent history. I'm like, what the heck is this? Unless, like we said earlier, unless you develop from a half a step above where the culture is and understanding what the content of the different dynamics in that culture are, the model's going to fail.
You can't pay both the bribe and the tax, right? You have to choose.
Yeah, choose one. In red, it's preferably the bribe.
Yeah. That's normal. That's how it works in that culture, right? So in a purple culture, it's normal that we do that. So
yeah, but again, those people in this peace board or board of peace, they take, they're going to have a lot of cash. The way it's built up, they're going to get a lot of cash. And there's a lot of cash need to be invested in infrastructure, and infrastructure is work. And this is food for people and future. So it's like I'm trying to not go all over the negating side, and also see this opportunity, because eventually opportunities is what happened. So, and I would say people that would not feel comfortable with it, but 7th of October actually created a chaos which opened opportunity.
Right.
Now, if it's going to be taken, if the other forces will not make it into a worse end than what it had, it's hard to predict. But from the span dynamics perspective, we're talking about a process that need to be there, and the Board of Peace only started, and if we can see or gonna develop as any yellow elements in this new organization that would be able to form those kind of processes that need to be aligned with the other processes. And the Palestinians had enough.
Yeah.
They had enough. Anyone who looks at Gaza understand that. And maybe in this kind of low state, they're going to rebuild. And I can look at the Lebanon situation right now, which they are not Palestinians, but they also have a similar force construction. Now, if Iran is going to change, maybe it's going to be easier to them to build, but they have more structure than Palestinians has right now.
Yeah, Lebanon has structure, Neri, but it's vacuous. There are no, except for a very passive army, Lebanon has no blue structures that function. I mean, and I addressed this in a big article I wrote that Auka used to train some Lebanese people in spiral dynamics, but there has been no institutions in Lebanon, and the ones that the West is looking to empower, whether it's Trump or the region, is have Hezbollah cede control of the security issues to the state. Well, the state is not capable of gathering. Historically, the Lebanese army has been passive by design. This is what the Cairo Accords of '67 called for, because Lebanon wouldn't join the coalition to fight Israel.
Yeah.
And their punishment was, you will let the Palestinians do their terrorist activities in South Lebanon, and the rule says Lebanese army cannot step foot in there. That was the standard that was set to how effective the Lebanese army would be. And all of a sudden, the Trump administration comes in and says, we're going to empower the army, but we're going to withhold their salaries because the U.S. pays most of the salaries for the generals and the soldiers in the Lebanese army. I mean, you can't have it both ways. Iran pays soldiers in Hezbollah $2,200 a month. With the Lebanese pound devaluating over the last 5 years, the Lebanese soldier gets $200 a month. I mean, what's, economically, which is better to go into? So level that asymmetry, at least in pay, so you can attract the typical Lebanese patriot who really wants to serve his country to come in and do it while being able to pay his bills. It's that, I mean, there's so many other disparities, but that's one of them.
Yeah. Well, in a way, we would say that when you don't have a yellow perspective for design, the systems that evolve is evolving through the hard path, through extreme situations, and sometimes disappear, not survive.
Well,
and this is not promising. This is not promising to Palestinians. In the way I see it, it's not promising to the Israelis as well, with all their might and power. Right now, when you look on the Israeli from the inside, from the outside, they had a strong army. Their economy is I'm confused. The Israeli economy survived this war, and it's only developed, and I cannot explain. Like, I don't know everything. I cannot explain all those elements or abnormalities of reality. Although we live now in an age of abnormality. We live in a situation where there's a lot of weird things happening around the world.
We're in collapse. So wait till we get to the other side, I suppose.
Yeah, but chaos is.
Thank you, Ben, for agreeing on that point.
Amir, I'm going to stop sharing this slide. Is that okay, or do you have more that you want to share?
No, I have other things. If we need them, well, I'll bring them up. But let's go forward.
Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to, because there's a comment made also in the, Barbara says, imposing Western models doesn't work. And I think, obviously I think we agree on that. I just wanted to underline how, and you also stressed that, Saeed, how Don asked, is like he wanted to train local people to apply spiral from their indigenous intelligence, right? And that's also well described in Elza's book. So I think that's an important thing to see, is that while obviously the research on spiral dynamics is done in the US, and you could say this is a Western model, but both in South Africa and in the Middle East, he wanted the local people to learn about the model, but then apply it in their local context, just to avoid those mistakes of Trump coming in and wanting to build the Riviera of the Middle East sort of thing. So.
Yeah. Just a comment on the Board of Peace that Neri brought up. I have to bring back the idea of the first slide that we showed. What does peace mean to the different value systems? And you look at the composition of that board, and you look at that table that I showed in the first slide, and when Trump has emphasized consistently that this is peace through strength, not through, not through dialogue, not through institutions, but it would reflect on that board that it will be one that's made primarily of, red individuals, autocrats, and oligarchs. I mean, this is a way that is barely entry stage blue, that red people with money can make a difference. Well, they can, but you're building on a very shaky foundation. Unless there's a blue structure there that believes in the role of the institutions, which Trump has rejected all along. I mean, his entire, presence in on the political arena is to destroy the blue layer that we have here in the States. And now he's exporting that to the rest of the global governing structures. I mean, you can't build peace through this new reality of something that, if you have money, you can influence the world. You cannot skip a development stage. And this is, and I'm afraid in the middle of the chaos, everybody's forgetting that.
I want to say something about Trump. The way he behaves, I always call it chicken. Like he breaks the system, and he says, "I'm going through," and then when everything's angry, he deals with what happens. And Trump is old, and he's not gonna be here in 10 years. And the plan is for 10 years, this stage of building Palestine. And hopefully other elements go and find a way to influence in this system that created, and it's clearly can go the wrong way. Like I'm sure of that. Like most likely, but there is some chances there, and this is where wisdom should get involved. This is where these kind of thinking need to find way through it and access those power elements, economic elements, structural elements, in order to help those elements to build something in case of just create another stage of fantasia that will blow up with pain.
I rely quite a bit on sources of information from the Arab world, from objective, pragmatic sources there that are in touch with life conditions, and the two largest complaints that I hear in the media about the Gaza plan fall into two categories. The idea that land ownership hasn't been addressed. The idea that, and one analyst in the Middle East says, this is going to be a lot like the Hariri plan that rebuilt downtown Beirut. In a sense, create a corporation that owns the entire downtown. So creating a development corporation that owns all of Gaza, if his analysis is right, and then the owners will get shares in that corporation, okay? And then there isn't actual, Arabs still like to have a deed to the land in their hands. That's what purple is all about. That's what ties them to the land. You give them a share, and share doesn't mean anything. Share is an imaginary. Might as well be Bitcoin, and you go to the store try to redeem it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to them. So that's one issue. That issue has not been addressed, and the other issue is most of the Palestinians that were interviewed, most of the Gazans that were interviewed for this, says the plan for development, the way Kushner proposed it, only provides for about a sixth of the housing needed in the area. Where's the other 80+% going to come from? How are you going to house these people? If you look at purple architecture, and there was a beautiful article using spiral dynamics to determine architectural style. If you look at purple architecture in the Middle East, I was born in a home that my great grandfather built, and then my grandfather built a floor on it, and then my dad built a floor. And that's how architecture in the purple Middle East works. If the family gets bigger, instead of just one floor, one apartment per floor, you do 2 or 3 apartments. And that's how, so it's high density that accommodates for a historically, dense area and population. All of a sudden, Kushner introduces this concept of modern urban development that, that as if the place is in Orange, with a nice single family home with trees and yards and, and yeah, you don't talk to your neighbor. No, it doesn't work, designed from a step or a half step at most above where the culture is. Give them the apartments they need to house 3 or 4 generations.
Yes. Yes, I'm totally agree. And the purple, this kind of avoiding the purple, because the orange doesn't see it. The prime orange, like all those purple, is just wish-wash. They live in the past. They're not. And when you talk with Palestinians, the guys that I work with, they would say to me, I work all day and I give the money to the father, and the father split the money. And when he gets old, we all support him. And all those system works for them for so many years and for so many generations, and they are invested in it. And now we come with with our Western, like the Zionists did. They come with the Western worldview, with this orange elements of thinking, and this doesn't work together. And how to grow it? Don told me, you need to be a gardener. You need to put things and support the development. It's not a magic thing. It's not a signing. It's a process, and need to be a wise organizer to all of that. And we don't see it right now. We don't see it in this peace plan. And again, I say it's opportunity. If we'll manage to capture it, I don't know. But
don't be surprised if the plan moves forward, because there is a V-mimetic harmonic between what Trump stands for and what the region stands for, especially the people who are driving this thing forward. MBS probably has an identical, if not identical, very close mimetic profile to Trump. He's centered in red, and he has orange aspirations, hoping that he can bypass the blue stage. In Trump's case, he wants to kill it, but MBS is not even there. They're still in purple red. He's the beginning of a healthy expression of red that now is shifting, Saudi Arabia towards the healthy expression of itself, but it's still centered in purple red. So don't be surprised that a lot of the wealthy Arab nations pile in on this plan, because to them it's an investment opportunity. Ignoring the layers that need to be developed for them to get there, to make that investment opportunity sustainable to all in the long run.
Yes.
So I would like to bring the conversation a little bit to the region, right? Because you've already mentioned it in a number of areas, and because from what I see, but please give me your insights in this, is that there has been a value shift in the region, right? There have been the Abrahamic Accords. It seems to be that some of the countries around have been developing more blue. Do you see that as an opportunity to help them actually develop that blue layer, which is so necessary in Gaza? Or do you see that they're opportunistic red and orange from the region is more powerful than the blue that's developing?
Well, that question was taking place on the Beck Graves discussion. I think it was a post that Rasa put up earlier this morning about the dynamics of having to skip the blue stage, and I answered that referring to an article I wrote a while back that talks about what happened in Dubai. Dubai thought because of the money they can modernize without having to go through the sequential stages of development, and basically they build an entire nation based on the idea that, hey, we're modern. We don't need to go through the building of institutions and everything else. And then the 2008 financial crisis hit, and the largest fund, the Dubai Sovereign Wealth Fund, went bankrupt, the largest of its kind to go bankrupt. Why? Because they allowed predatory investors into the scene that built this nation. We visited Dubai when, around the time that, the CHE Palestine issue was happening. And you'd see sewer gathering trucks come every night to these high-rise buildings to take the sewage away every night. And we asked why, and says, well, they didn't have time to build the infrastructure. That's a symbol. The infrastructure, the boring stuff that's underground that you don't see, symbolizes what blue is all about. It is, you have to build the roads. You have to, 20 years to build, sewer systems, water systems, energy systems underground, and then the roads go on the top of that, and then you do the pretty stuff. No, Dubai did the pretty stuff. And I'm afraid that it was only after, I'm looking at Rasa, she's cracking up, but it's only after the financial crisis set in, they said, hey, we need to build some blue structures here. And they began to introduce things like, okay, we won't allow more than 30% of every new project to be owned by investors. Blue. The US has had that for 100 years. We won't allow, this to be this. Blue. And it's like they select what's going to work for them to continue as if orange is they're there. And so I just can't see how the blue, the way we know it in the West, where a cop stops you for speeding and you acknowledge that you sped and you get a ticket. In Dubai, if this happens, and if the cop is Indian, which is 80% of the culture there is foreign labor, and the cops are all foreign labor. If you stop a native and you're an Indian cop, he would beat you up on the spot and leave you to die. That is the red that's still happening in the Middle East this day. So that's a thin slicing of what the blue system needs to reflect.
I also agree that blue is key.
But do you see it develop in the region? So I think from the analysis, it's clear that we need the blue layer. Where is it going to come from? Where do you see that, if at all? Maybe you say we're not seeing it happen at all, but where? So if we could have any influence, where would we get the blue? Where would we do that?
Well, we need to import blue elements. They could come from elements in the Arab world. I don't know enough to point where. But it's like if I had the power and I would search and find those elements, thinking of they need a healthy blue layer that will replace the elements of blue Hamas there, and also in Israel we got less of the blue elements. They got weaker and weaker and shift into the religious blue rather than the legal blue elements and infrastructure development. And also, Israel has these infrastructure elements, and in some circumstances, maybe we can have those kinds of element transfers. Although right now it's very hard with after the 7th of October to engage in that in this kind of collaborations.
And Saeed, is there any of the countries in the region that you see as most probable to help inject that into Gaza?
Well, all you have to do is dangle the orange money attractor to purple red to say, oh, no, we can skip blue altogether, you know? So, yeah, the short answer is not really. But if we can follow the patterns in which Dubai developed, and maybe add the element that, you know, the peak oil is around the corner, that, you know, the revenue that defines 75 to 80% of the GDP of every country in the Gulf region is coming to an end within the next 50 years. What are they going to do about it? You know, Don used to say, don't let a good crisis go to waste. There needs to be like Dubai only started building blue out of necessity because they lost a lot of money. If the financial crisis didn't happen, risk would have been measured at a considerably higher rate in the entire region now because everybody would have wanted to copy Dubai. So I anticipate that a crisis is coming up, you know, that from that we will learn something and begin to address each country's own indigenous blue with an alliance from that, with an alliance forming in the region. So who has that? I would say successful monarchies. I would say Jordan might be a good model to follow. Elements of Egypt because it's still autocratic and corrupt. The army owns half of Cairo. You know, other elements, I really don't see too many. You know, MBS, you know, if he proves that he can do all the leadership that things that he's talking about as far as development and weaning the country away from oil into more diverse sources of their GDP, you know, might be a good example. But you know, the Middle East is a region, as Don would say, that has preference to the individualistic systems. You know, they planted in purple, but the attraction of orange is undeniable. It doesn't matter how strong the blue is; they will always jump to orange. And you know, and the idea that corruption or you know or nepotism are a part of the history does not bother them at all. And that is really like a recipe for blue to fail. And so these are the elements that need to be addressed first. And what's next for the Middle East is benevolent monarchy, you know, or a similar equivalence to it in modern language. You know, in Lebanon, I will do, although, you know, it had, you know, we boast about how great our democracy is and we're the oldest democracy in the region. It doesn't work. It is vacuous. It is tribes that still run the region. You know, and the end of the Civil War didn't mean that we all reconcile our differences. It's going to have to be designed similar to what Switzerland has. Cantons that deal with each other with decentralized control over matters that have to do, like, you know, the Maronites are resistant with integration. You know, it's very, Lebanon still falls on secular lines. You know, the Sunnis have their own thing. The Maronites have their own thing. The Catholics have their own. You know, so it's you find the leaders in these things and have them empower their own communities, and then that begins to form. That begins to identify areas of synergy that the different communities have, and you bring those together. That needs to be in place for decades, if not centuries, for blue to begin to emerge naturally. And you know, with the attraction of orange money being there, the trajectory is not going to happen the way it needs to happen.
After peak oil.
Can I add?
After peak oil, yes.
One thing that I would add is make sure democracy as simple idea wouldn't work. I remember Elza's idea of stratify democracy, the idea that we need to set the governance system to match the culture of the people. And maybe it needs some work, and maybe some of the Palestinians that went to the West for a generation of two have something to contribute in that, hopefully. Again, right now, I don't know what is their position. I actually, in 2006, I found a friend in Germany, actually brought him to this, and I remember telling him, come back to Palestine. We need to build Palestine. We need people like you. And he came back and lived in a village near Jenin. I met him through the years, and it was so awful to him, so he went away. So it's very hard for those Palestinians to come back, even like one generation. But again, if this we have the money to pull things up, but we need to avoid those purple red people, and be very careful on into the process of finding the solution. It's not it's not something like you point out and find. You need to grow it in a way.
Right. Let me put a little nuance on that, Neri. A middle school friend of mine from Lebanon who became a very successful architect. When I was visiting Lebanon, probably 12, 15 years ago, he says, "Wow, what you're doing with spiral dynamics. This is fantastic. You should consider, like you said, you should consider coming back to Lebanon and help." Help the country build. And he goes, and I know some influential politicians that you can meet with, and community members. And I'm like, oh, great, set it up, and I'll talk to them. At the end of the talk, they were accusing me of being a Mossad agent. So you got to be careful in how you phrase what modernity represents to them. You always have to package it in local purple language. And so that's the impediment of people who've been educated in the West and have a concept of what the East needs, what the Middle East needs. That's why we engaged NAFIS. It wasn't Elza who did the work.
Yes.
It was NAFIS who told us what the work needs to be. The importance of indigenous intelligence.
But there's a question from Barbara. What would encourage Palestinians to come back? Now, Neri, you just told how you encouraged somebody that wasn't very happy, but any idea about the current situation? Could the diaspora actually have any influence on the future?
I would tell them to do what the Zionists did. Prepare yourself in Europe. Prepare yourself in the United States. Come ready with tools. Come ready with money. Come ready to do the work.
Yeah. And then the question becomes, do you hold Cappy to influence change?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Learn spiral dynamics. Get the yellow perspective, the yellow glasses. Otherwise, you're gonna fall into those traps.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clear. So there's another topic that I sort of written down to and this is about so there's this peace plan and all that. Part of this peace plan was the disarmament of Hamas, right? And that there doesn't seem to be any appetite for anybody to get their fingers into that. So what's your views on that?
You want to start, or I?
Go ahead, Neri.
First thing, I would say that it's very nice that we look at Hamas, and it's very clear it's need to be disarmed and removed. But also elements in Israel need to be constrained. Otherwise, they are feeding back into the society of the Palestinians and creating another kind of Hamas. So you can get rid of it and you get it back because the Israeli Reds are hitting on them all the time and creating life condition to create that. I think that in a way, I think it's much less hard than people think. I think that if the current situation, the economy will be controlled at this stage, so Hamas cannot hold too much time in the situation. And when Arabs elements, if they're gonna have the blue elements in them, gets in, like in our simple processes through time, this element will be less and less stronger. And the idea that they destroyed Gaza can plays out into removing them from power and influence. But for that, we need something else that hold those things. We need something with power. We need something with influence. And those are in Palestine, and those need to be grown from within. And again, it's a process that needs thinking and it's not just killing Hamas and get rid of them. It's a process of creating alternative.
Yeah.
You know, my question to you, Neri, is how does the dynamic needs to change? It has to stop being tit for tat, because the Palestinians will always be weak, and Israel will always be militarily superior, intelligently superior, mimetically more complex than the Palestinians. My question to you is this: how anxious are the Israelis to become part of the Abraham Accords? How anxious are they to sign a peace with Saudi Arabia and the entire region, to the point that they will, instead of looking at the Palestinians are our enemy and they need to be fought all the time, we have to take into other considerations that now we have an entire regional economic power that has the potential to compete with the world, that we have to preserve that before we go back to the tit for tat with the Palestinians. And would that, do you think that would change the dynamic and how the Palestinians behave? I would say it would, because it will move them a little bit out of purple. But you know, I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Well, first, I mentioned the internal struggle within Israel, and right now we have purple, not purple, blue-red elements, extreme elements in the governance, and actually they're walking around. But we have election this year, and there is some option that the regime will change, although it's not necessarily be stable. The new regime, if it's not be led by Netanyahu, and it would be stable enough and would have some Arab-Israeli elements in it, would be very, very fond of the idea of the Levant future based on this Arab money, and they can work with it. Although right now, if you talk about with Israelis about a Palestinian state, even though people that was peace now 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right now they cannot see it. They cannot see it. And it's like, it's very hard to deliver it. And again, it's 10 years from now. And through this process, there is some chance that this kind of new governance will form those kind of relations, but it would lead also to Israeli internal civil war, because those red-blue elements in Israel, even if they lose the power, they will continue fighting because they are ideologues, they have beliefs, and they'll fight with it, and they're going to be very aggressive. My projection. But the Israelis need to do that. The Israelis need to be Israelis. It's an Israeli challenge. We Israelis need to take it. Now I talk about from the Israeli perspective. We need to take it, and I don't know if it would happen. I don't know. I told you at the beginning, I'm a opto-pessimist right now.
Opto-pessimist.
So in this, Barbara is bringing in, the role of Iran, and so let's phrase the question like this, I mean, it looks like Trump may be planning something, right? And let's assume that somehow in the next months, the Iranian regime falls, right? Obviously, we don't know what will replace it, but how do you see that influence the whole situation, given that Iran has been such a prime donor to Hamas and Hezbollah?
Yeah. Well, the way I see that happening, if the regime falls, there's going to be chaos in Iran. There isn't anything that anybody can point to now and say, the Republican Guard has already endorsed someone. As long as they keep them, they don't dismantle them like we did in Iraq, as long as they keep the Republican Guard in place, that the blue layer of security will be guaranteed for the Iranian people. I'm not seeing that. And so it is, and Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, who's reared here in the States, and he seems to be intelligent enough. Whether They'll accuse him like they accused me of being of being an agent of a foreign still can't be determined. But I know one thing for sure, that the influence that the mullahs have exerted through their efforts to spread the theological aspect of Iranian brand Shia will come to an end. Hezbollah will collapse gradually because it will no longer get the funding. In the middle of chaos, while Iran reorganizes and finds its balance, and look at what happened in Iraq. Iraq still doesn't have a functioning. I mean, it's reasonably functional, but it took them 20 years from the end of the war to get to where they are now. I would anticipate that Iran, being a far more resilient culture, will reorganize and form a new government sooner than that. But one thing for sure is that they will look to see if the Abrahamic Accords happen. They would look to see that the entire region now is really in a peaceful, quasi state of peaceful coexistence with Israel, and that they cannot ally themselves with other radical visionaries anymore. The intelligence that has made Iran such a pragmatist culture in the past has eroded with the mullahs being in charge the last 50 years. And so it needs to return to that. But at minimum, the influence of the mullahs is going to come to an end.
Yeah.
Influence of the mullahs as a proxy force, as people who empower the Hezbollahs and the Hamas of the world with endless funding to attack Israel. That's going to end.
And any export of the ideology stops, right?
Right. Yeah.
I want to add something. Well, first, the idea of blue that we use, there is a healthy blue and non-healthy blue. And we mentioned the blue that we need here is not the blue that the mullahs have with their aggression. In a way, the processes are not for the next week. You remember Trump telling you that he would finish the Russian-Ukraine war in a day, and it doesn't work that way.
It took him 2 hours, Neri. Come on, what are you talking about?
I just let him.
But
in a way, but in a way, if Iran changes, it would be good for Iran, and it would be good for the region in a lot of ways. And it would enable what Said described, and it would enable Israel to change towards that direction. But I expect the internal Israeli civil war, it's also can create Iranian civil war, and there's a lot of unknown how it's going to end up. Although, again, the West is strong and strong in its arms, strong in its finance, so its influence towards the end of those processes, I tend to go to that direction. So it's like I tend to be optimistic when I look at that in a way.
Do you see does either of you see Russia play a role? Because all I see is that they've lost footholds in the Middle East, with Assad falling. But is that do I miss something there, or do you see Russia's influence diminishing?
No, they're preoccupied with Ukraine. That's where their energy is going. Maybe they'll offer, like they did to Assad, they'll offer, a place for the mullahs and top leadership in Iran. They'll offer them political protection to move there with their billions, of course. But yeah, that's the.
Yeah, I want to say that they added something. The idea of a multipolar world, actually, what they brought in. They didn't have the power eventually, and we expect them to fail eventually, although they have the nuke, but they cannot use it. But the idea of a multipolar world also can contribute for the Middle East. Then we can have the Levant idea, and now they have the Jews here, and they can use this powerful state to their advantage in a multipolar world. So, and again, this is very far away idea, but those kind of changes of the worldview that we all going through, I think, and this is Russian contribution, and Trump in a way played into it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
So, and John is injecting China. Any influence from China in the region at the moment? Talking about multipolar world.
I think China still plays from behind the scenes. They're looking to become the economic superpower of the world. They've quietly rebuilt the Silk Road, to improve commerce with the region. So that'll become a regional alliance. That will become more of a. I haven't seen them act visibly on the political scene, but the way they do things is that they go into countries and they give them a highway, and in return, for a less developed country, they give them a highway, and in return, they ask for all their all their precious metals. That's how China's been operating. Eventually, as they if especially if here in the States we continue with the red leadership of peace through strength, through brutal strength, the Chinese are going to claim their political clout over the world, and you begin to see dynamics change. But as of now, I just see them as an economic power that is capable of creating alliances, and it will be multi-layered alliances with the region, with the Arab world, with the rest, like they've done with the rest of the world. They will eventually become the superior economic power because they still produce stuff. Here in the States, we have services and AI. They still produce stuff, and so that will give them an influence over the world.
All of the electronics we use today has probably been built either in China or in Taiwan or in South Korea. So.
Yeah.
Well, China and Taiwan is not the same place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
the same China.
That's not a debate.
We're gonna buy Taiwan soon, Neri. Don't worry.
See, we have an agent of the Chinese Secret Service in our midst.
There you go.
Good. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to say about it, but I thought we bring in the topic of what's happening in Western countries. Like here in the Netherlands, I just don't know. If I would vote for a political party that has a sensible idea about what's happening in the Middle East, I couldn't vote any party. They're either on the side of, being anti-Israel or pro-Israel, basically. Because I can't even say it. What's really been painful for me, I haven't had contact with a number of Palestinians over the last years who are fighting for, democracy, and some of them have been tortured or jailed by Hamas, but their fate is not something that what we call the pro-Palestine movement in the West is focused on. Now that's a pretty broad movement, so it consists of very extremist and very moderate people. But I think from the Western perspective, or maybe it's a question to you, Neri. What would the Western support look like for the situation there that would actually be constructive rather than, choosing to be pro or anti-Israel?
We also we already found out that we need blue.
But how can the West? So there's this, there's this calls on sanctions and things like that, and in fact, most of the stuff being discussed here.
There's a few elements, and the Israelis in the room maybe don't like what I'm going to say. Israel, we described a little bit of the internal influx of Israel, and if we let the internal system to guide Israel, they would not let a Palestinian state to emerge, and the situation will decline, and the pro-Palestinian will say, well, we told you so, and all that. So we need a way to influence Israel society to go towards the orange-green elements of thinking and support it. And the orange-green is open to the outside world. I remember Netanyahu said that Israel gonna be separated. He called it Spartan. We're gonna be Spartan. This is what he said, and this is not a good future to
Yeah.
be. So it's like in one way, you know, the way the Israeli don't letting, you know, when you talk about the international law in Israel, you have two opinions. One opinion say, well, there is international law, so they said that this West Bank is occupied, so we cannot settle in it. And the Jewish way say, well, we can debate it. And they debate, and they find a way to debate it and say, well, the international law is something that there's nobody who can force it and all that. So in a way, Israel needs the world to help it directed towards the West and not
Yeah.
to fall into itself. And this will help the Palestinians. But if you go and say, well, I'm pro-Palestinian, the Israeli think you're going to support building Palestine that will do a 7 October again. And we cannot do that. And it's only us to protect ourselves, and voices of the orange green will disappear until the economic crisis that will come. But this is, you know, we'll get to the good end, but through a very bad path, and the Palestinian will suffer through it. It's like the suffering will not end.
Yeah. Well, just to zoom out a little bit on this issue, Auka, if you look at the life cycles of paradigms, the way, you know, if any of you are familiar with Graves's, you know, different stage life cycles. In my latest work, I applied that to political systems and, you know, global economics and even what's happening with climate change. But if you zoom out and you look at where we've been since the end of World War II, the ideology that has brought together the Western world as the leader is in collapse. I mean, you look at, you know, we talk about importing our blue, the Western blue and the likes of Donald Trump and his supporters in the Middle East. Well, yeah, look at where your democracies are. They're collapsing. They're moving to the right. You know, this is what we told you all along. You need to be more autocratic than you are, you know, egalitarian and green. So there's that stigma that is now becoming a reality, or the right is making it a reality for people to embrace different models for governance. And my suggestion will be, just like I said earlier, let the damn thing collapse. You know, if Trump is doing anything right, he's accelerating the collapse of the current sick system. You know, electing a new Democrat to the White House, or even a majority Democrat, both House and Senate, is not going to solve that problem. The marginal benefit from still carrying a model that is 80 years old is not there anymore. You know, so the system needs to collapse, and we need, I mean, we're desperate for new blue. We here in the States, we are desperate for a new blue that knows how to regulate orange, that could work on controlling monopolies, reinforcing antitrust laws that allow Google to become the most valuable country in the history of humanity in 10 years. Those things need to, and AI, I mean, all of that. And on the top of that, we need a new blue that takes into account the idea that the life conditions have changed, and that big part of the new life conditions is the digital age that no one, I guarantee you, no one in Washington understands. How could you even attempt to regulate something if you don't understand it? We need people like Tristan Harris, if people know who he is. He's someone who used to be the head of ethics at Google. He left Google because he saw the potential that the digital age is going to cause to the world. We need people with that kind of thinking leading this thing I call smart blue, blue designed from yellow. This is the West needs to reinvent itself in reinterpreting the purpose of blue institutions before they start exporting it somewhere else. And because that hasn't happened, the autocrats take advantage of that and laugh at it. Trump laughs at it. MBS laughs at it. Oh, no, no, no. My style, see, Western democracy is falling apart. The way I do it is best. Only only I can fix it. Remember those words.
Well, this is something that caught me. The speech of the Prime Minister of Canada, Carney, at the World Economic Forum. One of the things that caught me in that, and I don't even know if I interpret him correctly, but what I hear him say is that because he's talking about how we can't pretend anymore. He was talking about how Havel described in '78, how the Soviet system, the ideology wasn't there anymore, but everybody was pretending to follow it, sort of thing. And he says that's how we've been doing international business. That's how a lot of us have followed the U.S. in wars that we knew were not morally sustainable from our perspective. And the way I see that is that from our orange or green perspective, we have a lot of focus on humanitarian values and civil rights and things like that for our countries, but we're very bad at exporting that. So abroad, we don't act from the same values, and he's actually addressing that. He's saying we can't do that anymore. And it's actually a response to what you're saying also, where Trump is creating such a chaos that we need to reorder ourselves as Western countries. And I don't know if if Europe is going to collapse the way that the US would on that. I think we have, it's a little bit different situation, of course. But if that would happen, that would also affect a lot on how we act in the Middle East and all that, because it would mean that we can't do business first anymore. That our approach has to have every layer in it. And then we have to make sure that if we do anything there, it's not about our business interest, but it's about the people's interest in basically that we export the human values in that. And maybe that's a little bit ideological green from my side, but I do think that would at least be part of something new that would emerge instead of what happened after World War II, which has had a lot of good effects as well, but which didn't sell very well in any other country but the Western countries.
Yeah, well, democracy is stratified. What does democracy mean on the spiral? What does leadership, and governance mean on the spiral? And it could very much be that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, is what's next for Saudi Arabia. And everybody admires Saudi Arabia for its wealth. And he will be the one who would move it up the spiral from, the dangerous Wahhabi Islam that funded all these schools that created the jihad and destroyed the World Trade Center and engaged in all kind of terrorist activities. He put a stop to that. And so if people can look beyond, Yellow has to make tough choices. The first thing that people say when they hear about MBS is that he killed, Khashoggi, the reporter for the Washington Post. Well, okay, Red does that, just because this guy is visible does not negate the thousands other Reds that this guy killed. But you look at what else he's doing. He's put a stop to the religious police in Saudi Arabia, which used to be by agreement with them and Al Saud used to get half of the revenues from the oil to put them towards promoting Wahhabism, the most radical form of Islam that created the chaos that we experienced in the early 2000s. He put an end to that. And you listen to him. I think it was you, Neri, who forwarded me an interview with him on Fox. But the guy's a brilliant orange mind. He's thinking of how to best harness the best resources that Saudi Arabia has. Saudi Arabia has mountains close to to Israel that has snow on them in the wintertime. He wants to develop ski slopes. Who knew that about Saudi Arabia? On the Red Sea, he wants to develop, a bunch of resort towns that are connected through high-tech transportation and all that. So he's an orange aspirant, but he's dealing with red life conditions that are still transitioning from an unhealthy state to a healthy state. And everybody in Saudi Arabia loves him. Everybody in the region wants to copy him. Stratified leadership, stratified governance. You have to embrace healthy red because that's what the region needs. You have to, the West has to be aware of that. The content is completely different. And as hard as it is for us to say, how dare he kill a Saudi patriot who became a U.S. citizen working for a journal, look at the big picture. As hard as it is to swallow that, look at the big picture. What he's doing is saving thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives in the future and making the place more and more peaceful.
And I think in addition to that, it's also important to realize that these memes, they don't develop overnight. So when we look at it through our green Western glasses, we're being politically correct. We see all these things going wrong. But I mean, the Declaration of Independence in the US was written by people that owned slaves, right? So if you would have been, but it was clearly, there clearly is blue and orange in how that was written. The Dutch in the Netherlands, I think it was 1917 that women got voting rights. So that's clearly an orange, maybe somewhat green move in the development of our country. But in 1917, we still owned a colony where we did terrible things, Indonesia, right, and other places. So in our history, these memes have developed over long periods of time. And I think that's also where and then, of course, we have to have the minimum. So like, we look at Gaza right now, we see there is an absolute lack of blue, and we know that that's necessary. But also, we have to have a pragmatic way of building that, because if we do that from an idealistic point of view, we're never going to get there. So we're going to be too perfectionist about it.
Yeah. So compare, Alka, compare the women's suffrages movement in the West that took place over 100 years ago to like what's happening in Saudi Arabia. Women were just allowed to drive a few years ago. They still have to wear the hijab, but in certain areas you don't have to. So this is how slowly things move. When you oppress the culture because you were purple who came into money through red measures, and you looked at the West to modernize, you got to be careful on how you do it. You can't transition to it with it'll end up in a revolution or end up in failure, and it has to be. Like you said, it takes time. You have to monitor the movement. You have to show that the culture is ready to move with you. I mean, all these things take a lot into account, and you can't just snap a finger and say, well, why can't they develop? Why can't they move away from this? Talking about an entire culture, not an individual or an organization.
Well, if you look, for instance, at Eastern Europe, it's actually gone at lightning speed compared to where Western Europe did that. So in a period of 30 years, there's been a lot of growth in healthier blue, more orange, and even a bit of green there. And in Western Europe, that took hundreds of years. So, of course, there's a bit of history behind it as well, and not in every country. But overall, it went really quickly there. And that's also when people look at Ukraine, they look at the corruption, but they forget where Ukraine came from and where it is now, right? And then there's been quite a development. Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to have to round off for tonight. Any famous last words by anybody? Maybe we just open it up, and I'm not inviting everybody to say a lot, but just maybe one sentence of how you've experienced tonight, or anything that comes up that you want to say before we close for tonight.
Okay, I'd like to say how much I have appreciated this conversation in the depth of the complexity that it has revealed, and the number of dimensions that are, that are present, and the feeling that we still haven't covered all of them. But I really like the sense of there's no simple solutions here, and there is so much that has to be looked at and taken into account, and I've really enjoyed listening to that.
Thanks, John. Ben, any comments?
He was silent.
I haven't said anything at all, so.
How's life in New Zealand, my friend?
Life in New Zealand, well, I'm a householder now. This is the first time in my life I'm supporting a family, so I'm in this tension between wanting a better future and looking at the U.S. collapsing in front of me in slow motion. not even in slow motion, getting speeding up. There's plenty of room. I've got an extra bedroom here, so.
I'll keep that in mind.
It may get very full there, Ben.
I'll put a calendar. You can pick your dates.
I just want to thank you, Neri, and you, Said, for it's so interesting to hear your perspectives and to mingle that, and so I really enjoyed the whole evening. Yeah.
Thank you, Lena.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, it helps to wear a shirt that's the color of the discussion of the group. So
Yeah.
I would also like to thank you all, us all, for this conversation, and I would like to have a next follow-up conversation in which we are looking also at the people and the trauma and the pain and how that is impacting, because we now very much, I think, spoke, and that was the purpose, and I think that's great. But I think with everything that's happening, with also the bottom up and the things that are happening and are also now with the social media and the speed and the complexity of AI, etc., etc., I wonder whether the immense trauma that has been and is all the time being worked out on many sides. But of course, if you look at the numbers, just sec numbers at this point in time, I just feel that is something that we need to take into account, perhaps more than that we have in the past hundreds of years. So I would just love to really look at it from that perspective as well. But for now, this was a very good, a great, exposure and sharing and reminder, and also bringing back many dear memories. So thank you for that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I'm grateful to be in the room. I'm grateful for the invitation and exceedingly happy to have arrived, unfortunately late, because I didn't understand the way the time clock was operating. But nonetheless, I would love further communication and to learn more about all the work that many of you have spent decades doing, and to understand how it reflects on what we're experiencing currently. So thank you.
Jack, good to see you.
I just want to say that we will post the recording on the Foundation's website, and we'll be putting it in a newsletter. You guys will receive a link in that, and we'll also post it in the Graves group. And I think the Graves group is a good place to continue conversations, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Good.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Neri. Thank you, Said,
Thank you.
for
Thank you all.
doing this. I also really enjoyed, hearing you and our conversation. I think this is very much what we were hoping to achieve. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, this
Thanks
is
everybody for
of old people.
yeah. Thanks everybody for connecting, and we will add you to our mailing list, whether you like it or not. But you can unsubscribe to the first mail you get. But that way we can also provide you with the video, and we will hope to see you next time. We don't have a fixed schedule. We know we are going to do something in March around what's happening in the US, so that may be of interest to some of you as well. But we'll keep you posted on any further ideas about this sort of salons that we'll have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.